Today we are going to look back at another episode of a Facebook web series that I shot about 7 months ago. Since that time, I've taken a lot of classes, taken a lot of workshops, bought more gear, and just evolved overall as a cinematographer. So it's good to reflect back on, look at some shitty work and say, I probably wouldn't have done that if I was to get that job today, 7 months later. I know these videos don't get the greatest amount of views, but for the little tight-knit community that do enjoy these things, then it's for us, and that's all that matters. So let's look into this. This is another episode of LOL Parenting, a little Facebook web series. I'll put a link down in the description below. Back then, I owned the GH4 along with the GH5, and I would normally shoot all of the LOL Parenting stuff with both of those cameras. Sometimes we would even use all three cameras. I used to have the G85 as well. Never really had a problem matching all that footage. There's a couple things to think about when looking back at this episode. The first one is we were dealing with not only toddlers. I mean, it's called LOL Parenting, so obviously every episode involves a child. This one had an actual baby in it, and there was a lot to deal with, working with babies on set. Something else interesting was, back then, I refused to use NDs when shooting indoors, right? I don't know what the thinking exactly was behind that. I just thought it was against the rules or whatever for me back then. But as you'll see, rather than just putting a 0.6 ND on there or something, I put 0.6 ND all over the windows outside. And it got a little crazy. There was diffusion out there. There was ND all over the windows, and then I closed the blinds, and it worked. It did work, but I don't know. Like, looking back on it, I was like, man, that was a hell of a lot of work. When really, probably all I had to do was just put a couple stops of ND over my lens. I could have left the windows open. Didn't have to mess with all that diffusion and ND all over the glass. Here, yeah, this is exactly what's going on. I have the Rokinon 50 Cine on the GH5. And the Sigma 18-35 on the GH4. Probably not the greatest idea trying to match those two lenses, but that's what we did. And I wouldn't recommend doing that. The Sigma doesn't match up with the Rokinon. I've done a whole video on that. So I wouldn't recommend mixing those two lenses, but 7 months ago, I guess I either didn't know or didn't care. Now, you want to talk about jumping line. Now, it is always difficult when shooting around a table. We even talked about this in film school. Like, filming around a table is a very difficult thing to do. And even in the new Queen movie, they have that table scene where they meet the manager and all that for the first time. And even in that scene, they jump line like crazy, even in the Queen movie. It is difficult when shooting around a table. I just liked this shot of being behind the little kid, and this was actually the same shot that we used to see the baby, when we went wide to see the kid, and then we went tight in to see the baby back there in her seat. Then we jump all the way over to this side. And now we're looking, over the mom's shoulder, straight down on the kid. Now, again, it all makes sense because we see everyone and we're making sense of it. But I guess technically you could argue that the line is right here, since I was originally behind him and then I'm over here. You could argue that, but I think at one point I even move over here. And once you come over to this side of the table, because I was here and then I was here, but now there's even a shot. I don't know if I have a screenshot of it, but there is a shot where I'm looking this way. However, I think it's later. I think there's like a time shift, so maybe you could say, well, that works. Oh, here's a prime example. But this is a different day. I mean, they're in different wardrobes, so you could argue that. Here you have the baby looking up probably at the microphone. This is a prime example too of like blank, bright white walls. Always a bummer. I don't always get to choose the locations, so it is what it is. Sometimes you're just thrown into these situations. Here's a pretty good example of like weird color grade options. Now, this shot right here is taken straight from the episode as it was released on the LOL Parenting channel. And this is the coloring that happened with it. Cinev was a good picture profile for them to use. That's what they found the easiest to color grade with for whatever reason. If I show you a screen grab of how I colored this same shot from my reel. Now look at this side-by-side action here. Really interesting stuff going on. Now I don't know, my eyes have a weird color shift when it comes to reds and greens, and it's hard for me to differentiate red from green. It's hard for me to see pink. It's really, really hard to see pink. You can tell me which of these looks better, but to my eye, I think the way that I colored this shot looks better to me. At least I think the walls look white at least. There just seems to be like a yellow murkiness to the way that the final product came out on their end, whereas, you know, this little shot, I did use like 2 or 3 seconds of this shot of this kid at the table. I thought it looked cool. I'm pretty okay with the lighting, you know. There's just like a 2-to-1 contrast ratio, not a big contrast ratio, but there is a slight little split down his face. I mean, and it just shows that, yeah, I work with kids, and there's many reasons to put this in the reel, right? I don't know. It's just a good way to show different ways of coloring side by side there. Now you can look at the BTS here and see what we were using. I was using the 1K. I put a CTB on it because the 1K is a tungsten, so I put a full CTB gel on it. Makes that light not nearly as bright. And then also I put diffusion on it. And then also I was using the Lowell Case Light 4-bank, which is essentially a Kino Diva 4-bank. And I had diffusion on that as well. So I had hella lights going on in this little area. Like a year ago, I was probably front lighting everything. And that's such a bad choice in terms of narrative work. Now, maybe if you're lighting an interview or something, yeah, go all in, front light, I guess, if you want to. But things that I've been learning, you know, through the classes and workshops that I take, like front lighting is generally not the best choice, especially when shooting narrative work. So looking back on this, I go, wow, this is cool. You know, I got lights that aren't really so much front lighting. Now, the baby, I was front lighting. There was some front lighting going on with the baby. You can see that 1K was, that 1K was definitely front lighting for the baby shot. That's no bueno. And the reasoning behind that mainly is because front light is usually the first way to get a flat image, pretty much. You know, just think about it. If you go front light, full on front light, meaning the light is coming from the same direction as the camera, you're generally going to get a flat look. You know, you generally want to keep either your key light all the way, like 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock to camera, or something like that, or maybe just go with a strong backlight, or you know, something to avoid full frontal, you know, key light. This shot I kind of dig. Now she's in the kitchen area. I kind of dig it. She's got a nice ratio on her face. We got a nice depth of field going on. I'm actually okay with a lot of the way this turned out. Here you'll see a prime example. I pulled all these blinds down, and on the other side there's ND and there's diffusion outside on the porch. I mean, I was really fighting all the sun coming through all these windows. It's just a bummer that these blinds are just like white sheets. I should have just left the windows open and put a couple stops of ND on. But, you know, you live and you learn. But this is a prime example. This is full-on front lighting, and you can just tell, like, it just doesn't look that appealing. You know, there's not a whole lot of separation. I mean, there is some separation of her, but it's just because the background is so dark beyond her head here. But then you jump to this shot, which is essentially the same day. This is supposed to be the same time, and now it's all bright back here, and you can see someone opened up the window. You know, this is our ND gel that I put on the windows, and here you can see because someone opened the curtain, and now, oh, what's that green thing? Oh, that's ND on the window. But, you know, if you don't know, you don't know. You can see even where it's curling up away from the window on the bottom there. But yeah, there's not a whole lot of continuity here because now our kitchen is lit up like a Christmas tree, and in the previous shot, it's dark as shit back here. So you can clearly tell it's the same day, you know, because this is the food that she was putting on the plate for the baby. So it's just not any continuity going on, which is a bummer. Here we have another example of jumping line. Now all of a sudden I'm way over here shooting at the mom, and we see the living room in the background. There's just a lot of bad jumps around the table. Here's another prime example of how the continuity went right out the window. A lot of continuity errors as far as lighting goes. Here, this shot I'm pretty okay with, you know, OTS looking down. This is an interesting shot. Weird framing choice that I went with. But I like, you know, how shallow the depth of field here is, but I don't know what's going on with the framing of that. I don't even know if that was my framing. We shoot this on 4K, so for all I know, they could have punched in on that. I don't know. And then here's one of the final shots. This is, you know, the following day. And again, just kind of very flat lighting. I don't know. So here you say, well, what could have we done differently? Well, the main things is just looking at the lighting setup here. You know, the biggest things that I would have done, I would have opened those windows, I would have put some ND on the lens, and I would have worked with it that way. I would have worked with the natural light a little more, and I probably would have left the big things of diffusion out on the back porch. I would have left that there to help, you know, soften the sun as it's coming through the windows, but I definitely would have opened those blinds. I don't like the way it looks with those paper blinds shut, and yeah, I think that would have just been more interesting to have more depth in the scene if we could have seen a little bit more out those windows, had some ND on it, you know, saw a little bit more of the world. And I would definitely not have had this 1K just front lighting so much. I think probably I would have just nixed the 1K altogether, you know, because you can see that I was using that LED panel, the little 1x LED panel. I was using that as a kicker light. We could have kept that, and I would have kept the Kino 4 bank. I would have kept that and just used those two lights. Just nixed the 1K altogether. It was just pumping way too much light in there. And we would have got a little bit better of a contrast, and probably just used some negative fill for my shadow side just to have some more contrast going on. And just those little elements would have made it more appealing, would have provided some more depth to the image, and not had so much flatness to it overall. Here you can see this 1K was completely being used to front light. So that's a bummer. I was basically just using it as a huge sun source. But then it's like, where is this huge source coming from, you know? You have the sun coming out of here. Why didn't I use the light out of this window, open the window up, put some ND on? There's your key. Your key is this amazing side source that I had given to me. There it was. There was my beautiful source. But instead, I decided to nix that and put this 1K up and go, no, this is my key. And I'm going to front light with this huge 1K key light. Bad choice on my half. You know, bad choice. But, you know, you live and you learn, and yeah. All right, I guess that's going to do it for today. You guys let me know, you know, if you got some stuff you want me to check out and you don't mind having it shared on the channel. I'd be more than happy to do that, and we could just, you know, break it down, take a little peek at it. Check out my kit link down in the description below if you want to check out any of the gear that I use on professional shoots or to make these YouTube videos. Big shout out to all of my subscribers. You guys rock, and for now, that's a wrap.